A race for Senate Majority Leader. This is consequential. And the divide is pretty stark between the Rick Scott camp and the Thune-Cornyn camp. I'll call that a combo. It seems like, at least according to the betting markets, it's Thune and Scott. Cornyn probably can't get there and will, but the expectation is that whatever support he's able to generate, he will fold in with Thune at some point in that contest. Rick Scott was on Fox and Friends yesterday pitching his wares, why he should be Senate Majority Leader.
Here's what I bring to the table. I clearly believe in the Trump agenda, number one. I'm a business guy that has success doing exactly what we need to do in the Senate. We need to have a plan. We need to work a plan. We need to have a team. We need to measure ourselves. If we want to get all the nominees done, we've got to figure out a plan to get it done. If we want to get a balanced budget, we got to start today to get a balanced budget. If we want to get the border secure, if we want to get whatever policies we have to get through Congress, we have to have a plan, just like what you do in business. I ran a company with 285,000 employees. We had a written plan for everything to get it done. My colleagues have told me they want change. They want to be treated as equal. They want to be part of a team. They want to have an agenda. They want to have a great relationship with the House. They know I have a great relationship with Speaker Mike Johnson. So I'm very optimistic that I'm going to win because I'm representing Trump's agenda and what my colleagues want.
I always like that. I mean, this is not a criticism of Rick Scott, but just like my colleagues tell me they wanted to be treated equal. Being in politics, I've seen this dynamic between leadership and rank and file in particular caucuses, and so much of the behavior is so immature. It's like, notice me, recognize me, pay attention to me, and so on and so forth. And it's usually from the people that are the least consequential in the caucus. Anyway, just a little digression, because I love that. I'm an equal. It's very sort of Barbara Boxer. Please call me Senator. I've worked so hard. John Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, was also on Fox yesterday talking about this contest and had this to say.
We haven't even had a meeting yet to hear the formal proposals from the three nominees about how, if at all, they will run things differently than Senator McConnell. Here's what I know. We will pick a leader who will advance President Trump's agenda.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by David Drucker, senior writer for The Dispatch and author of In Trump's Shadow, The Battle for 2024 and the Future of the GOP. That battle has been waged. David Drucker, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Good to be here.
So I know at least Thune has made sort of an overture of, we need to come together to move Trump's agenda and so on and so forth, to try to distance himself from some comments in the past that have been critical of Trump or suspicious about his chances to win in 2024. Cornyn has made similar comments. But to Kennedy's point, if the caucus is going to pick a leader that will advance Trump's policy agenda, is Rick Scott the only person they can pick?
I don't think so. But this is what they're going to sort out. I would keep in mind that this is a secret ballot, closed door election. This is not like the House of Representatives where everybody has to stand up on the floor of the chamber and announce their vote publicly. All right. And this is only a vote of Republicans. This is not a vote of Republicans and Democrats. I mean, both sides in the House always stick to their person. But just to give you an idea of the dynamic here, so people can say publicly anything they want. As senators running for leadership posts in the past have learned, because it's a secret ballot election, the only vote you can count on when you're talking to individual senators, colleagues asking for support, is when they tell you they're not going to vote for you. Because if they tell you they are, it doesn't really mean that much. That's number one. Number two, it's unclear exactly how this is going to play out, because senators could be looking at this in a number of ways. To begin with, they want someone who is going to take tough votes for them, shield them from problems, raise a lot of money, and advance their interests. Part of the problem with coming together behind a single agenda in the Senate, and I don't mean this about Trump's agenda, that's different, but about coming up with a plan, is that, as one very conservative Trump-supporting senator once told me, You find a plan that I can get behind and Susan Collins can get behind, and sure, let's do a unified plan.
Right.
Otherwise, these senators all consider themselves their own CEO, and they want to go about however they're going to get to yes or no in their own way. And successful Senate leaders, whether Democrat or Republicans, in terms of the leaders that get support and are able to stay in their position, the successful ones are the ones that do a lot of listening and allow these senators to come to their own conclusions in particular ways. Trump is going to have a lot of sway, at least in the first year, not the first 2 years. You don't need a Senate Republican leader to gin up support for Trump and his agenda, because he's doing that all on his own. So what they're going to be looking at here is, how do I want to be managed? Who do I want calling the shots on the floor in terms of what legislation gets to the floor and what doesn't, how the committees are handled? And that's a separate question from Trump, which that's a voter question. But these voters are not normal voters. They're U.S. senators.
But I think the concern is not that Trump's agenda will not be. Let me put it a different way. The concern is that some of these guys, Thune and Cornyn in particular, could turn out to be impediments to Trump's agenda.
Yeah, I just don't think that's, well, anything is possible. I don't think that the senators in the Republican conference are going to look at that as an issue, because the immediate agenda is tightening the border, deporting criminal aliens, cutting taxes, cutting regulations. The initial issues that we're going to see are going to be things with a broad base of support. And again,
right, but I mean,
they look at themselves. They don't. They're not necessarily picking a leader to advance Trump's agenda, because to them it's a given. They're looking for a leader that will help advance them to their next reelection, and that doesn't mean Scott cannot win. I'm just saying stylistically, the way they look at it is different than the discussion you and I often have about what voters want.
No, I understand, but there's a, it's easy to say the first items on the agenda, things like the deportation of criminals and so forth. But once you start to move down the road, particularly if you move down the road in legislative form, I mean, you have some people that were on board with that bipartisan quote unquote immigration reform legislation from last term, and there's going to be some very different positions and very different tolerances for controversy when it comes to getting into the nuances of immigration reform, being demagogued on family separation, for example, and who is willing to stand fast the way that Tom Homan does. Those dynamics matter.
All of that. Yeah, they do, but that kind of legislation takes 60 votes, and you're not going to have 60 votes because Democrats are not going to join in. So that's kind of irrelevant. Unless Trump cuts a deal with Schumer that can bring up enough Democrats on board, it's not happening anyway. The reason the tax legislation is so relevant here is because via this process we call reconciliation,
right,
tax legislation isn't subject to a 60-vote filibuster or any filibuster, and therefore Republicans can get this done as long as they don't squabble among themselves.
So who do you think Trump is going to back for Senate Majority Leader?
Well, the question is, does he back anybody publicly or not? I think with Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk and others in that circle coming out for Scott, I think that's an indication of Trump's preferences. The question is whether he decides to get involved in a very public way. I don't have reporting insight, but of course, if you look at how his endorsement of Jim Jordan did not help Jim Jordan get across the finish line in this race for House Speaker last year, he might be hesitant to get involved publicly in case this does not go his way, because it's really unnecessary for him to spend political capital on this. Both Thune and Cornyn are saying that they're open to some of the procedural changes that Trump wants, and that they're not really hostile to any of the top line agenda items. And so I don't know if Trump needs to do anything more than signal, this is what I expect. I'd also take a look at the idea that if it isn't Rick Scott, that John Cornyn could actually muscle his way to the number one spot, because he's up for re-election in 2026. He's going to have a Republican primary, or at least could, and could be more sort of amenable to bending to Trump's will than somebody like John Thune.
No, that's an interesting aspect of it, sure. The cabinet that's taking shape, any surprises to you, people that are potentially, if not curious fits, maybe they weren't the most talented, capable, experienced picks Trump could have made from Trump world for those posts?
Well, listen, Trump likes loyalists and he likes converts. Mike Waltz as the National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State, Elise Stefanik as the UN Ambassador. These are all people who come from the sort of Reaganite portion of the coalition, but have long since become Trump loyalists and converts. And I think Trump likes that more than he likes a true believer. And ultimately, Trump talks to a wide variety of people. Don Jr., J.D. Vance, Tucker Carlson, they're all going to be whispering into Trump's ear on foreign policy matters. And, I'm weird this way, but I don't always really think that personnel means policy because the president ultimately has to decide. And although Rubio and Waltz, they don't really buttress Trump's natural instincts and opinions on foreign policy, I don't think it matters all that much because, Trump is going to do what he wants and he's going to be surrounded by people who do agree with him. And look, one key change in the West Wing is instead of having Mike Pence in the chair talking to him about what he's doing, it's going to be J.D. Vance who, if we're looking at what Trumpism means, is probably more Trumpy than Trump in certain aspects.
The D.C. Press Corps response and the people that they amplify on their programs and in their periodicals and so forth, essentially the position was that the election result was not an indictment of Kamala Harris, it was an indictment of America. Do you expect that to change very much in the near term?
Well, listen, I've read various things in the press. I think for those of us who cover campaigns and understand politics, what we've been writing is that she made a number of mistakes, but also she was attached to an administration that voters found, either unresponsive or not responsive enough to their concerns about inflation and public safety. And you look at the history of American elections, when people can't afford to eat and they fear for their own safety or their family's safety, they're usually not going to re-up the incumbent party, let alone the incumbent. And Harris essentially functioned as the incumbent here as the sitting vice president. And there are many threads to look at in this election with the shift toward Trump among Hispanics and young men, black men, and all of that to make it a rather remarkable result. But ultimately, politics is usually pretty simple. And I think it's as simple as people saying, I'm going to go with the guy who, when he was president, other than that one weird year of the pandemic, I could afford things and I felt safe.
Real quick, I just want to go quickly back to cabinet positions. What are your thoughts on the possibility of Governor Kristi Noem as Homeland Security Director?
Again, the question will be whether she can manage the agency, but this all starts at the top. If there's anything, Trump can often be transactional, but if there's anything he believes, it's on trade and then on things like securing the border and stopping illegal immigration. And so it's really more important to me what Trump thinks, because Noem is going to have to do what Trump thinks. And, I don't think we've seen anything in her background that suggests she would fight Trump on this, but especially Trump having been through this once before, you're going to see most policy on issues Trump cares about come from the West Wing, and the agencies are simply going to be sort of operational appendages and not making their own decisions. And so that's how I look at most of these cabinet appointments.
David Drucker, senior writer for The Dispatch, author of In Trump's Shadow, The Battle for 2024 and the Future of the GOP. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
This is Sean Thompson for Donley Auctions. Here's a fact. Extra cash is a really good thing right now. Here's another fact. There has never been a better market for antique items than right now. Donnelly Auctions wants everything you have when it comes to antique collections. Their worldwide audience is waiting to give you top dollar for them. Call them at 815-923-7000. If you have a weapon of any kind, any military items, they are in desperate need of military